They say justice is blind, but on a lonely stretch of highway in Virginia, Officer Brett Sterling thought justice was something he could twist with a lie. He looked at the woman in the driver's seat, calm, silent, and black, and saw an easy target. He saw a conviction. He saw a career boost. What he didn't see was the shimmering trident pin hidden in her glove box, or the classified clearance level that exceeded that of the state governor. He didn't know he was planting evidence on Commander Jordan Kincaid, a Tier 1 Navy SEAL returning from a Black Ops extraction. Officer Sterling was about to walk into a courtroom and lie under oath, completely unaware that he wasn't just fighting a defendant, he was declaring war on the United States Navy. The rain in Norfolk, Virginia doesn't wash things clean, it just makes the grit stick harder. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday when Commander Jordan Kincaid turned her beat-up 2015 Ford F-150 onto Route 17. The truck was a ghost, grey, nondescript, with a slight rattle in the muffler. It was the kind of vehicle you bought when you spent 10 months of the year deployed in places that didn't appear on standard maps. Jordan was exhausted. Not the kind of tired you feel after a double shift at a desk, but the bone-deep, marrow-sucking exhaustion of a 72-hour extraction mission that had gone sideways in the Horn of Africa before righting itself in the final hour. She had landed at Nassau Oceana 3 hours ago, debriefed for 2, and just wanted to get to her small cabin in Chesapeake, open a beer, and sleep for a week. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She was dressed in a charcoal grey hoodie, black tactical cargo pants that looked like generic hiking gear, and a pair of worn-out boots. Her hair was pulled back in tight braids. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired woman driving home from a late-night warehouse shift. Officer Brett Sterling, sitting in his cruiser in the shadow of the weeping willows near the Deep Creek Bridge, considered himself a trained eye. He wasn't. Sterling was 3 years onto the force, a man who had peaked in high school as a second-string linebacker and had been trying to reclaim that glory ever since. He was bored. His quota for the month was low, and his sergeant, a hard-nosed veteran named Miller, had been riding him about his lack of proactive policing. Sterling saw the tail light of the F-150 flicker. It didn't go out. It just fluttered, likely a loose wire. That was enough. He flipped the lights. The red and blue strobe cut through the Virginia rain, painting the wet asphalt in violent colors. Inside the truck, Jordan sighed. Her pulse didn't jump. Her heart rate, conditioned by years of Buddha's training and high-stress combat drops, remained a steady 55 beats per minute. She checked her mirrors, signaled, and pulled over safely onto the shoulder, killing the engine and rolling down the window. She placed her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Palms open, visible. Sterling took his time walking up. He shined his maglite directly into her side mirror, blinding her, then pivoted to blast the beam into her face. It was a power move, designed to disorient. "License and registration," Sterling barked, his hand resting on the holstered Glock at his hip. "Good evening, officer," Jordan said, her voice raspy but calm. "It's in the glove box. Permission to reach?" Sterling didn't like her tone. It wasn't fearful. It was professional. It was the voice of someone who wasn't intimidated by the badge, and to a man like Sterling, a lack of fear felt like disrespect. "Why were you weaving back there?" Sterling lied. He shined the light into the back seat, empty, save for a duffel bag. "I wasn't weaving, officer. I maintained my lane." "Don't argue with me," he snapped. "I saw what I saw. You look glassy-eyed. You been drinking?" "No, sir. I'm just tired, coming home from work." "Work? At 2 a.m.? What kind of work you do?" "Government contractor," Jordan said. It was the standard cover. Technically true, but vague enough to be annoying. "Uh-huh. Step out of the vehicle," Jordan hesitated for a fraction of a second. She knew the law. She knew she hadn't done anything to warrant an exit order. But she also knew the statistics. She knew that arguing on the side of a dark road with an agitated man with a gun was a tactical error. She opened the door and stepped out. She stood 5'9", lean muscle coiling under the hoodie. She stood with a natural, balanced stance that Sterling mistook for aggression. "Face the truck, hands on the hood," she complied. The cold rain soaked through her hoodie instantly. Sterling began the pat-down. It was rough. He kicked her ankles apart wider than necessary. His hands lingered too long on her pockets. He fished out her wallet and opened it. He looked at the ID. Jordan T. Kincaid. Dobb. 04/12/1988. "Kincaid," he muttered. "You got any weapons on you, Kincaid?" "I have a pocket knife in my right cargo pocket. No firearms on my person." Sterling pulled out the knife. It was a standard-issue bench-made, scratched and well-used. He tossed it onto the wet ground. Then he walked back to his cruiser to run her name. This was the moment where fate usually intervened. If Sterling had run her name through the NCIC database correctly, he might have gotten a flag. A do not detain without DHS contact flag. But the system was slow tonight, and Sterling was impatient. He saw a black woman in a beat-up truck in a nice part of town, and he had already decided how this night was going to go. He turned off his body cam. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small, clear plastic baggie containing a white, powdery residue. He'd confiscated it from a junkie 3 weeks ago and never logged it into evidence. He kept it for insurance, for nights when he needed a win. He walked back to the truck. He opened the passenger door and leaned in, pretending to search the center console. He dropped the baggie between the seat and the console. "Well, well, well," Sterling said, his voice dripping with mock disappointment as he found the bag. He held it up in the rain. "Government contractor, huh? Looks like you're contracting some illicit substances." Jordan turned her head. She saw the bag. Her eyes narrowed. The calm in her demeanor shifted, hardening into something glacial. She recognized the setup immediately. "That is not mine," she said. Her voice dropped an octave. It sounded dangerous now. "That's what they all say." Sterling grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back to cuff her. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance." "Officer," Jordan said, wincing slightly as the metal bit into her wrist. "I am an active duty service member. You are making a mistake. I am requesting you call your supervisor immediately." "I don't need a supervisor to book a junkie," Sterling laughed. He shoved her against the truck. "Stop resisting." "I am not resisting," Jordan said clearly, speaking for the dash cam she hoped was recording. "I said stop resisting," Sterling yelled, ramping up the drama for the audio. He swept her leg, slamming her face first into the hood of her truck. Her cheekbone cracked against the metal. Blood began to mix with the rain on the grey paint. For a split second, Jordan's training almost took over. She could have dislocated his shoulder, swept his knee, and had him unconscious in 3 seconds. It would have been effortless, but she knew that would be the end of her career, and possibly her life. A dead cop on the side of the road doesn't look like self-defense, no matter who you are. She went limp. She let him manhandle her into the back of the cruiser. As the door slammed shut, separating her from the rainy night, Jordan Kincaid stared through the wire mesh. She tasted blood in her mouth. She watched Officer Sterling picking up her knife from the mud and pocketing it. He thought he had caught a rat. He had no idea he had just caged a lion. The ride to the 4th Precinct was silent. Sterling tried to goad her a few times, playing loud rock music and making comments about cleaning up the streets. But Jordan sat in the back like a statue. She was running through the tactical situation in her head. Objective. survive the intake, secure legal counsel, notify command without compromising the current classified operation she had just debriefed. Threat level, moderate. The legal system was a different kind of battlefield, one where the rules of engagement were murky. When they arrived at the precinct, the fluorescent lights buzzed with an irritating hum. Sterling marched her in, gripping her arm tight, parading his catch past the front desk. "What you got, Sterling?" asked Sergeant Miller, looking up from a stack of paperwork. Miller was a heavy-set man with tired eyes who had seen too many rookies try too hard. Possession, resisting. Maybe DUI. She refused the breathalyzer in the field. Sterling lied smoothly. Found a baggie of blow in the front seat. She tried to fight me when I found it. Had to subdue her. Miller looked at Jordan. He saw the bruise forming on her cheek, the blood drying on her lip. He saw the calmness in her eyes that didn't match the description of a drug-crazed resistor. "Name?" Miller asked her. "Jordan Kincaid," she said. "Booking is down the hall. Sterling, get your paperwork done. I want it airtight." In the interrogation room, they chained her to the table. Sterling left her there for 3 hours. This was the sweat out. He wanted her anxious, crying, ready to take a plea deal just to go home. But Jordan didn't sweat. She sat perfectly still, regulating her breathing. She entered a meditative state she used when waiting in transport planes before a jump. She built a mental file of everything that had happened, the timestamps, the weather conditions, Sterling's badge number, 410-922, the specific lies he told. Finally, at 6 a.m., a public defender walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was rumpled, and he smelled like stale coffee. "Ms. Kincaid, I'm Arthur Banks. I'm the public defender on rotation. Look, I've seen the report. Officer Sterling says he found cocaine in your car, and you fought him. It's a felony possession charge, plus assault on an officer. They're pushing hard." Banks opened his file, not really looking at her. "Usually, with a first offense, if we plead this down, we can get you probation, maybe community service. If you fight this, and a jury believes a cop, you're looking at 3 to 5 years minimum." "Mr. Banks," Jordan said. Arthur Banks finally looked up. He stopped shuffling his papers. The intensity of her gaze pinned him to his chair. "I am not pleading to anything," she said. "I need you to do exactly one thing for me. I need you to contact the JAG office at Naval Station Norfolk. You need to speak to Captain Holloway. Tell him Viper 3 is in the box." Banks blinked. "JAG? Your Navy? Why didn't you tell the cops?" "I told the officer I was active duty. He didn't care. And I don't answer to civilian police regarding my specific duties." "Okay, look, even if you are Navy, this is a civilian crime. The Navy can't just wave a wand and make a cocaine charge go away. It wasn't my cocaine, Mr. Banks, and I didn't resist." Banks sighed. He'd heard "it wasn't mine" 1,000 times. "Ms. Kincaid, it's your word against a decorated officer." "Decorated?" Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Check his record, Mr. Banks. Check his complaints. And call Captain Holloway. If you don't, you will be complicit in a very large federal incident." There was something in her voice, a command presence, that made Banks shiver. He nodded slowly. "Viper 3 is in the box. Okay, I'll make the call, but don't expect miracles." Banks left. Jordan leaned back. The waiting game continued. Meanwhile, out in the bullpen, Sterling was high-fiving another rookie. He was typing up his report, embellishing the details. He wrote about how she was erratic, how she lunged for his weapon, how the drugs were plainly visible. He was building a narrative. He was painting a picture of an angry, dangerous black woman who hated authority. It was a narrative he knew the local jury pool would swallow. He didn't know that Arthur Banks was currently on the phone with a very confused and then very terrified lieutenant at the naval base. "She said what?" the voice on the other end of the line asked. "Viper 3 is in the box. Look, is this woman crazy? She's sitting in a holding cell in a hoodie." There was a long silence on the phone. Then the sound of a chair scraping back and a door slamming. "Mr. Banks," the voice said, deadly serious. "Do not let anyone interview her. Do not let her sign anything. We are sending a representative. Do not move her." "Who is she?" Banks whispered, staring at the phone. "She's not just a sailor, Mr. Banks. Just keep her there." The line went dead. Banks walked back to the interrogation room window and looked in. Jordan Kincaid was sitting exactly where he left her, eyes closed, head tilted back. She looked like she was napping. Back at the precinct front desk, Sergeant Miller was frowning at Sterling's report. "You sure about this assault charge, Sterling? She looks pretty banged up, and you don't have a scratch on you." "She was fast, Sarge," Sterling said, grabbing a donut. "But I was faster. Had to put her down hard to keep everyone safe." "Right," Miller grunted. He stamped the file. Processed. The machine was in motion. The lies were on paper. The charges were filed. Sterling went home to sleep, dreaming of a commendation. He woke up the next afternoon to a phone call from the district attorney's office. They wanted him to prep for a preliminary hearing. They were fast-tracking this. They wanted to make an example of her. Perfect, Sterling thought. He put on his best suit. He practiced his sad, disappointed face in the mirror. He was ready to destroy Jordan Kincaid's life. But across town, inside a secure facility at the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DAVGARU, a printer was whirring to life, spitting out a heavily redacted operational log from the night before. A timeline was being constructed. Satellite imagery was being pulled. Commander Jordan Kincaid wasn't just a soldier. She was the commanding officer of a Tier 1 counter-terrorism unit. And while Sterling was playing checkers with local statutes, the United States Navy was preparing to play 4D chess. The storm was gathering, and Officer Brett Sterling didn't even have an umbrella. 48 hours later, Officer Brett Sterling felt like a king. The story had already hit the local news blotter. Local police subdue violent offender with narcotics. He'd received pats on the back from half the precinct. He was the hero who got a dangerous drug user and potential dealer off the streets before she could hurt someone. He sat across a polished mahogany conference table from Assistant District Attorney Sarah Jenkins. Jenkins was 32, sharp as a tack, and aggressively climbing the political ladder. She saw every case as a rung, and Jordan Kincaid was her next step up. "Okay, Sterling. Walk me through it one more time for the preliminary hearing tomorrow," Jenkins said, clicking a silver pen. "We need this tight. The public defender, Banks, is a bleeder. He'll try to get her a plea deal for rehab. I don't want that. I want felony conviction. I want prison time. This woman attacked a uniformed officer." Sterling leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Like I said in the report, Sarah. I clocked her weaving, initiated the stop. She was belligerent from Jump Street, glassy eyes, slurred speech. When I spotted the baggie, plain view by the way, sitting right on the passenger seat, she snapped, lunged at me. I had to use necessary force to subdue her. She slammed her own face into the hood, trying to fight me." Jenkins nodded, scribbling notes. "Good." Slammed her own face. That explains the injuries on her mug shot. What about the body cam? The log says it was off during the altercation. Sterling didn't flinch. He'd practiced this lie in the shower. "Equipment malfunction. Damn thing has been fritzing for weeks. I've put in 3 requisitions for a new one. Sergeant Miller can verify." Miller wouldn't verify the requisitions because they didn't exist. But Miller would verify that Sterling complained about the camera, which was close enough for government work. "All right," Jenkins said, closing the file. It's a slam dunk. She's nobody. A government contractor living in a shack in Chesapeake. Probably lost a low-level clearance due to drugs and is spiraling. We go in hard, set bail at $250,000, and force a guilty plea by Friday. Good work, Brett. They shared a smug smile. They were the architects of justice in this town. While they congratulated themselves, Arthur Banks was sitting in the county jail visitation room, sweating through his cheap suit. He had spent the last 2 days trying to get any information on his client and had hit a brick wall that felt made of classified titanium. The door opened and Jordan Kincaid walked in. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too short in the arms. The swelling on her face had gone down, leaving a nasty purple and yellow bruise over her left cheekbone and eye. Despite the uniform and the injury, she didn't look like an inmate. She walked with a predatory grace that made the guard escorting her seem nervous. She sat down, picked up the phone receiver on her side of the glass, and waited. "Ms. Kincaid," Banks stammered into his phone. "I made the call you asked for." "And?" Her voice was calm, steady. "And I don't know what's happening. 2 hours ago, my boss got a call from the Department of Justice telling us to sit tight. Then I got a call from a JAG officer, a Captain Holloway. He's flying in. He's taking lead chair on your defense tomorrow." Banks looked around nervously, lowering his voice. "Who are you? I looked up your record. It's clean. Too clean. It's like you didn't exist before 2010. "Mr. Banks, my existence is none of Officer Sterling's business, and right now, it's none of yours. Your job right now is to ensure the court procedure is followed to the letter until Captain Holloway arrives. Did they run the drug test on me?" "Yes. They took blood right after booking. And the results? They haven't come back yet. The lab is backed up." Jordan allowed herself a very small, cold smile. "They aren't backed up. They just don't like the answer." She knew her blood was cleaner than distilled water. She also knew the substance in that baggie was likely low-grade street cocaine containing cut agents that would never be found in her system. "What about bail?" Banks asked. "The DA is asking for $250,000. "Let them ask," Jordan said. "I'm not going anywhere just yet." She hung up the phone and signaled the guard. As she walked back to her cell, she catalogued the layout of the jail, the shift changes, the weak points in the security, just out of habit. She wasn't trapped in there with them. They were trapped in there with her. That evening, a black G-Wagon pulled up to the private hangars at Norfolk International Airport. Captain Elias Holloway stepped out. He was a man in his late 40s, built like a linebacker, wearing a tailored suit that cost more than Officer Sterling's car. He was the kind of JAG lawyer the Navy deployed when a situation went beyond FUBAR, when high-level assets were compromised by incompetence. He was met on the tarmac by 2 men in plain clothes, holding tablets. "Brief me," Holloway ordered, walking toward a waiting sedan. "Sir, Commander Kincaid, call sign Viper 3, was detained 48 hours ago by Norfolk PD. Arresting officer is Brett Sterling. Charges are possession with intent and assault on an LEO. We've pulled Sterling's file. He has 7 excessive force complaints in 3 years, all dismissed by internal affairs. He's a cowboy. What about the commander's status?" She had just completed Operation Obsidian Spear, the extraction of the HVT from Somalia. She was transporting highly classified intel in her personal vehicle due to the nature of the exfil. The intel was secured by a secondary team an hour after her arrest. The local police have no idea it was even there. Holloway stopped walking. His eyes were ice cold. "You're telling me a beat cop stopped the commander of SEAL Team 6's developmental group, assaulted her, planted drugs on her, while she was carrying top-secret SCI clearance material. "Yes, Captain, that is the situation." Holloway let out a slow breath. This Officer Sterling just stepped on a landmine that's going to blow up half of Virginia. "What's the play from Devgru?" "Admiral Reese wants blood, sir. But he wants it legal. He wants Sterling destroyed in open court. He wants an example made so that no local yokel with a badge ever thinks they can fabricate charges against one of his operators again." "Understood," Holloway said, getting into the car. "Get me the body cam footage logs, the GPS data from Kincaid's truck, and verify the serial number on the weapon Sterling confiscated. I'll see you in court tomorrow." The Norfolk County Courthouse was buzzing the next morning. Ada Jenkins had leaked to a friendly reporter that she was prosecuting a violent, drug-trafficking government contractor who assaulted a hero cop. The courtroom gallery had a decent crowd, including a few of Sterling's off-duty buddies come to support him. Sterling sat at the prosecution table, looking sharp in his suit. He gave a confident nod to Sergeant Miller in the front row. When Jordan Kincaid was brought in, the murmurs started. She was still in the orange jumpsuit, handcuffed at the wrists and ankles. She walked with her head high, scanning the room once before sitting at the defense table next to Arthur Banks. Then, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and Captain Elias Holloway walked in. The atmosphere changed instantly. Holloway wasn't wearing a Navy uniform. He was in a charcoal Italian suit, but he carried himself with undeniable military precision. He carried a slim, expensive leather briefcase. He walked straight to the defense table, shook Banks's hand, and nodded once to Jordan. "Morning, Commander," he whispered. "Admiral sends his regards." "Captain," Jordan replied quietly. "Took you long enough." "Had to gather the ammunition. Are you okay?" "Bored. Let's get this over with." Judge Martha Reynolds, a no-nonsense woman who had seen it all, banged her gavel. "Docket number 492001, People versus Jordan Kincaid. Charges are felony possession of a controlled substance and felony assault on a police officer. Are we ready to proceed with the preliminary hearing?" Ada Jenkins stood up, radiating confidence. "The people are ready, Your Honor. We intend to show sufficient cause to hold the defendant over for trial and request bail be set at $250,000 due to the violent nature of the arrest and flight risk." Holloway stood up. His voice was a smooth, deep baritone that commanded the room. Captain Elias Holloway, appearing pro hac vice for the defense, alongside Mr. Banks. "We are ready, Your Honor, and we strenuously object to the bail amount as punitive and ridiculous." Judge Reynolds peered over her glasses. "Captain, you aren't local?" "No, Your Honor. I am based out of D.C. I am specializing in this matter." Sterling leaned over to Jenkins. "Who's the suit? High-priced D.C. lawyer for a contractor?" "Probably family money hired him," Jenkins whispered back dismissively. "Doesn't matter. He wasn't there. You were. Just stick to the script." Jenkins called her first and only witness. "The people call Officer Brett Sterling." Sterling walked to the stand, chest puffed out. He swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Jenkins walked him through the softballs, name, rank, years on the force. Then she got to the night in question. "Officer Sterling, tell the court what happened at approximately 2:15 a.m. on Route 17. Sterling cleared his throat, making eye contact with the judge. "Yes, ma'am. I was on routine patrol when I observed the defendant's vehicle, a grey Ford F-150, swerving significantly across the double yellow line. I initiated a traffic stop." "And what was the defendant's demeanor?" "Combative immediately. Slurred speech, bloodshot eyes. I asked her to step out. When I went to pat her down for weapons, I observed a plastic bag containing white powder on the front seat. As soon as I saw it, she shouted expletives and attacked me. She grabbed for my service weapon. A gasp went through the gallery. Jenkins paused for effect. She went for your gun? Yes, Ms. Jenkins. I feared for my life. I performed a tactical takedown. In the struggle, she hit her face on the truck. I managed to cuff her and secure the scene. Thank you, Officer Sterling. A brave response to a dangerous situation. Jenkins sat down, looking triumphant. Judge Reynolds looked at the defense table. Cross-examination? Captain Holloway stood up slowly. He buttoned his suit jacket. He didn't pick up any notes. He walked toward the witness stand, stopping about 10 feet from Sterling. He stared at Sterling for a solid 10 seconds before speaking. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Sterling shifted in his seat. Officer Sterling, Holloway began, his voice deceptively gentle. You stated my client was swerving significantly across the double yellow line. Is that correct? Yes. That's why I stopped her. Route 17 is a 4-lane highway in that section, officer. There is a concrete divider, not a double yellow line. How did she cross a concrete divider without crashing? Sterling blinked. He swallowed. I meant the white dotted line. Between lanes. I misspoke. Misspoke. I see. A significant detail to misspeak about for a trained observer. Now, you stated she was combative immediately. What exactly did she say? She was just loud, disrespectful, said she didn't have to show me ID. Strange, Holloway said, taking a step closer. Your own police report, written an hour after the incident, quotes her as saying, "Good evening, officer. Permission to reach?" That sounds remarkably polite for a combative, drug-addled suspect. Sterling's neck started to get red. The report summarizes. I can't remember every exact word. You remembered her grabbing your gun pretty clearly a moment ago. Let's talk about that gun grab. You said she lunged for your weapon while you were patting her down near the rear of the truck. Which hand did she use? Her right hand. Holloway paused. Her right hand. Interesting. Officer Sterling, are you aware that my client sustained a severe rotator cuff injury to her right shoulder during a training exercise 4 days prior to this arrest? Medical records indicate she could barely lift her arm above her waist, let alone lunge for a holstered weapon. Jenkins jumped up. Objection. Facts not in evidence. We will enter the medical records at trial, Your Honor, Holloway said smoothly. I am merely testing the officer's recollection. Overruled, the judge said, looking interested now. Answer the question, officer. Sterling was sweating now. Look, it happened fast. Maybe it was her left hand. I just know she went for it. You seem very unsure about the details of a life-or-death struggle, officer. Let's move to the drugs. You found them on the front seat? Yes. Plain view. Another interesting discrepancy. Your initial radio call to dispatch, which is recorded, states, and I quote, "Suspect in custody, commencing search of vehicle." If the drugs were in plain view, why did you need to commence a search after she was in cuffs? Sterling looked at Jenkins for help, but she was staring down at her notes, frowning. The slam dunk was hitting the rim. I saw it, secured her, then announced the search to be thorough. It's standard procedure. Is it standard procedure to turn off your body camera during a violent arrest? Holloway dropped the hammer. Sterling fell back on his prepared lie. Like I told the ADA, it malfunctioned. It's been broken for weeks. Holloway smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. A malfunction. That is terrible luck, because, Officer Sterling, we subpoenaed the diagnostics logs from the camera docking station at your precinct this morning. Guess what those logs show? Halloway walked back to his table and picked up a piece of paper. "They show that your camera was working perfectly during your shift start at 10 p.m. They show it recorded fine until 2:16 a.m., exactly 1 minute after you pulled over my client, and then the logs show a manual power-down sequence was initiated. You didn't have a malfunction, officer. You turned it off." The courtroom was dead silent. Sterling was pale. Jenkins was staring at Sterling with open fury. Halloway walked back to the witness stand and leaned in close, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that the microphone still caught. "You have lied about the reason for the stop. You have lied about her demeanor. You have lied about the assault. And you have lied under oath to this court about your body camera equipment. Do you want to amend your testimony now, Officer Sterling, before you dig this hole any deeper? Because I assure you, I have a lot more paper in my briefcase." Sterling looked around the room. The friendly faces weren't friendly anymore. The judge looked ready to issue a bench warrant right there. He realized with dawning horror that the woman in the orange jumpsuit hadn't said a word, and yet she was completely dismantling his life. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Halloway straightened up and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, in light of this demonstrable perjury by the state's only witness, the defense moves for immediate dismissal of all charges with prejudice and the immediate release of Commander Kincaid." Judge Reynolds stared at Sterling. "Officer Sterling, step down, and don't leave the building. Counselor Jenkins into my chambers. Now. Captain Halloway, you too." The gavel banged down like a gunshot. The silence in Judge Reynolds's chambers was heavy enough to crush a tank. The room smelled of old law books and furniture polish, a stark contrast to the sterile, panicked atmosphere of the courtroom they had just left. Judge Reynolds sat behind her desk, her face a mask of controlled fury. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Jenkins stood near the window, her arms crossed, trying to distance herself physically and legally from the disaster that was Officer Brett Sterling. Captain Elias Halloway sat comfortably in a leather wingback chair, looking less like a defense attorney and more like an executioner waiting for the signal. "Ms. Jenkins," Judge Reynolds began, her voice dangerously quiet. "Do you have any explanation for why your star witness just admitted to manufacturing probable cause and tampering with evidence in my courtroom?" "Your Honor, I was blindsided," Jenkins said quickly, her voice pitching up. "The prosecution had no knowledge of the body camera logs. Officer Sterling assured me." "Officer Sterling is a liar," Halloway cut in. He didn't raise his voice, but the weight of it filled the room. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another file, a blue folder stamped with the Department of the Navy seal. He slid it across the desk to the judge. "Your Honor, before you make your ruling, you need to understand who exactly Officer Sterling arrested. This isn't just a case of police misconduct against a civilian. This is a matter of national security." Judge Reynolds opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first page, and her eyebrows shot up. She flipped to the second page, reading the redacted service record, the commendations, the rank. "Commander?" Reynolds whispered. She looked up at Halloway. "She's a SEAL commander." "Commander Jordan Kincaid is the officer in charge of a specialized intelligence unit within DevGru," Halloway explained. "The night she was arrested, she was carrying digital intelligence that, if accessed by uncleared personnel, would have compromised agents in 3 different hostile nations. When Officer Sterling threw her in a holding cell and left her vehicle unsecured in a tow yard for 4 hours, he risked the lives of 12 deep cover operatives." Halloway leaned forward. "The Navy isn't just asking for a dismissal, Your Honor. We are informing you that the Department of Justice is currently filing federal charges against Officer Sterling for deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and potentially obstruction of a federal operation. Jenkins went pale. She realized that political ladder she was climbing had just been set on fire. "Dismiss the charges," Reynolds said, closing the folder. "Dismiss them with prejudice. And Ms. Jenkins, if I find out you knew anything about that camera being turned off, you will be disbarred before sunset." "I didn't, I swear," Jenkins stammered. "Then go out there and fix this," Reynolds ordered. "I want Sterling in cuffs before he leaves that building." Back in the courtroom, the murmur of the crowd had grown into a dull roar. Sterling was sitting at the prosecution table, staring at his hands. He knew it was bad, but he didn't know how bad. He thought maybe he'd get a suspension, maybe a reprimand. Cops survived perjury allegations all the time, right? The blue wall of silence would protect him. He looked back at Sergeant Miller. Miller wasn't looking at him. Miller was looking at his phone, typing furiously. Sterling felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The wall was crumbling. The door to the chambers opened. Judge Reynolds marched out, followed by the lawyers. The bailiff called the room to order. "Please be seated," Reynolds said. She didn't look at the files. She looked straight at Jordan Kincaid, who was still sitting calmly in her orange jumpsuit. "Ms. Kincaid, on behalf of the Commonwealth of Virginia, I offer you a sincere apology. The charges against you, felony possession and assault on an officer, are hereby dismissed with prejudice. You are free to go." A ripple of shock went through the gallery. Sterling's head snapped up. "What?" he mouthed. "Furthermore," Reynolds continued, turning her gaze to the prosecution table like a weapon. "Bailiff, take Officer Brett Sterling into custody." "Excuse me?" Sterling stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't arrest me. I'm a police officer." "Not right now, you're not," Reynolds snapped. "You are in contempt of this court, and I am holding you on suspicion of perjury and filing a false police report. You have the right to remain silent, Mr. Sterling. I suggest you start using it." Two bailiffs moved in. These were men Sterling knew. He played softball with one of them, but there was no camaraderie in their eyes today. They grabbed his arms. "Don't touch me!" Sterling yelled, panic finally setting in. "Sarge! Miller! Do something!" Sergeant Miller stood up in the gallery. He looked at Sterling. Then he looked at Captain Holloway, who was watching with a grim smirk. Miller slowly put his phone in his pocket and walked out of the courtroom without saying a word. The click of the handcuffs on Sterling's wrists echoed through the room. It was the same sound he had enjoyed hearing on Jordan's wrists 3 nights ago. Now, it sounded like a coffin closing. As they dragged Sterling out through the side door, kicking and shouting about rights he had denied others, Holloway turned to Jordan. "Commander," he said, "we have your uniform in the conference room, and there is a car waiting." Jordan stood up. She stretched her arms, wincing slightly as her bruised shoulder popped. She looked at the empty spot where Sterling had been sitting. "He's not the only one, Elias," she said softly. "I know," Holloway replied. "He's just the first domino." 20 minutes later, the doors of the courthouse opened to a swarm of media. The story had leaked. Navy officer framed by dirty cop. But the reporters weren't expecting what they saw. They expected a victim in civilian clothes. Instead, Commander Jordan Kincaid walked out wearing her full-service dress blues. The gold stripes on her sleeves caught the sunlight. The rows of ribbons on her chest, bronze stars, purple hearts, commendations, told a story of sacrifice that silenced the crowd. And above her left pocket, the trident insignia, the Budweiser, gleamed. She didn't stop for questions. She didn't smile. She walked with the unstoppable momentum of a destroyer cutting through waves. She got into the waiting black government SUV. As the car pulled away, the cameras pivoted to the side entrance, where Brett Sterling, stripped of his tie and belt, was being shoved into the back of a prisoner transport van. The juxtaposition was brutal. The hero and the villain had switched costumes, and the world was finally seeing them for who they really were. The crash of a career is loud, but the dismantling of a corrupt life is a slow, grinding noise. Officer Brett Sterling spent his first night in general population. Judge Reynolds had denied his request for protective custody, citing overcrowding, though everyone knew it was a punitive measure. Sterling didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of his cell, terrified, as inmates he had mocked and arrested whispered threats from the darkness. But the real horror was happening outside. The investigation wasn't local. The Norfolk Police Department tried to launch an internal affairs probe, hoping to contain the damage, scapegoat Sterling, and move on. But Captain Halloway had made a call to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Special Agent David Ross arrived in Norfolk 3 days after the dismissal. Ross was a man who hated dirty cops more than he hated criminals. To him, a criminal was just doing their job. A dirty cop was a traitor. Ross sat in the interrogation room across from Sterling. Sterling looked like he had aged 10 years in 72 hours. He was unshaven, shaking, and wearing a jumpsuit that smelled of mildew. "Here's the situation, Brett," Ross said, tossing a thick file onto the table. "We raided your locker. We raided your apartment. We found the stash you kept. 3 ounces of cocaine, unregistered firearms, and about $5,000 in cash that we can't trace to your salary." Sterling stayed silent. His lawyer, a cheap strip mall attorney because the police union had revoked his representation, signaled him to say nothing. "We also tested the baggie you planted on Commander Kincaid," Ross continued. "It was baking soda mixed with about 1% lidocaine and trace amounts of meth. It was junk. But here's the kicker. The DNA on the baggie. It matched a seizure from a drug bust 6 months ago. A bust logged by Sergeant Miller." Sterling's eyes widened. "That's right," Ross smiled without humor. "Miller gave you the throw-down drugs, didn't he? He taught you how to do it." "I can't talk about Sergeant Miller," Sterling stammered. "He'll kill me." "He can't kill you from federal prison, Brett, and that's where he's going. But you're looking at 20 years. Kidnapping, perjury, federal civil rights violations. You'll be an old man when you get out. Unless," Ross leaned in, "unless you give us the precinct, give us the system. Tell us who else plants evidence. Tell us who else turns off their body cams. You give me the network, and maybe, just maybe, you do 5 years in a minimum security fed camp instead of 20 in the state pen." Sterling broke. He wept. And then he sang. He told them everything. He told them about the quota contests on Friday nights. He told them about the drop guns kept in the trunk of Cruiser 4. He told them about how Miller doctored the overtime sheets. He named 3 other officers who routinely targeted minority drivers for easy arrests to pad their stats. While Sterling was snitching, the karma was hitting his personal life with the force of a tsunami. His fiancée, a nurse named Emily, had stood by him for the first 2 days. Then, the body cam footage was released to the public. It went viral instantly. Millions of people watched Sterling mock Jordan Kincaid. They watched him slam a compliant woman's face into a truck. They heard the sneer in his voice. Emily watched it once. Then she packed her bags. She left the engagement ring on the kitchen counter of the apartment they could no longer afford. She blocked his number and issued a press statement distancing herself from his abhorrent behavior. Sterling's landlord served him an eviction notice. His truck was repossessed. His face was a meme for police brutality on every social media platform in the world. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a national joke. 2 weeks later, the FBI raided the 4th precinct. It was a morning that would be remembered in Norfolk history. 20 agents in windbreakers marched into the bullpen. They arrested Sergeant Miller at his desk. They arrested Officer Griggs and Officer Lowry in the locker room. They seized computers, logbooks, and dashcam servers. The chief of police was forced to resign in disgrace later that afternoon. But for Jordan Kincaid, the most satisfying moment wasn't seeing the arrests on the news. It came a month later. She had been cleared for duty, her shoulder healed, her security clearance restored after a rigorous review. She was back at the DevGru compound at Dam Neck, preparing for a training cycle. She received a summons to give a victim impact statement at Sterling's sentencing hearing. He had taken the plea deal. The courtroom was packed again. Sterling stood before the judge, a new judge this time, Federal Judge Leonard H. Vance. Sterling looked broken, hollow. Jordan walked to the podium. She didn't wear her uniform this time. She wore a simple black suit. She looked at Sterling, who couldn't even meet her eyes. "Mr. Sterling," Jordan said, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, "you looked at me that night and you decided who I was. You decided I was powerless. You decided my life had no value other than to advance your career." She paused. "You were wrong about who I was. But more importantly, you were wrong about what justice is. Justice isn't a badge. It isn't a gun. It is the truth. And the truth is, you are a small man who used a big shadow to hurt people." "Today the lights are on." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this man didn't just attack me. He attacked the oath he swore. He attacked the community he was paid to protect. He is a traitor to the uniform he wore. I ask that the court shows him the same mercy he showed me on the side of Route 17. None." Judge Vance nodded solemnity. "Brett Sterling," the judge said, "the damage you have done to the public trust is incalculable. You have pled guilty to civil rights violations and perjury. I am sentencing you to 84 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are remanded immediately." The gavel banged. Sterling didn't fight this time. He slumped. As the marshals led him away, he looked back one last time. He saw Jordan Kincaid, standing tall, watching him go. She didn't look angry anymore. She just looked done. She walked out of the courthouse and into the bright Virginia afternoon. Captain Halloway was waiting by his car. "Justice served?" Halloway asked. "Something like that," Jordan said. She put on her sunglasses. "It's a start." "What now, Commander?" Jordan checked her watch. "Now? I have a team to briefing in 800. The world doesn't stop because one bad cop got caught." She got into her truck, the same grey Ford F-150, now repaired and dent-free. She started the engine. The rattle in the muffler was still there, a familiar, comforting sound. She pulled out into traffic, merging onto the highway. She drove past the spot on Route 17 where it had all happened. She didn't slow down. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, moving forward, leaving the wreckage of Brett Sterling in the rearview mirror where he belonged. Prison was only the beginning of Brett Sterling's nightmare. While he sat in a segregated cell in federal lockup, Commander Jordan Kincaid authorized Captain Halloway to open a second front. A massive federal civil rights lawsuit under 42 U.S. Code, Prabhuagar of 1983. Jordan didn't want money. She wanted scorched earth. The smoking gun. During the discovery phase, Halloway's team seized the 4th Precinct's digital archives. What they found destroyed the city's defense overnight. It wasn't just Sterling. He was part of a group chat labeled the Night Shift. The logs revealed a systemic quota ring where officers targeted minority drivers in older vehicles, people they assumed couldn't fight back. They had a shared spreadsheet tracking easy arrests to pad their stats. They had built a business model on ruining lives until they tried to ruin the wrong one. Panic set in at City Hall. The city attorney offered a $5 million settlement, with a strict non-disclosure agreement. They wanted to buy Jordan's silence. "Tell them no," Jordan ordered Holloway. "I don't want their millions. I want the truth on the record. I will settle for $1. $1? Holloway asked, stunned. $1. But no NDA, and a federal consent decree that forces independent oversight of the precinct for 10 years. Every hire, every fire, every promotion gets audited by the DOJ. The city had no choice. To avoid a public trial that would air the night shift texts to a jury, they capitulated. The Kincaid decree was signed. In 6 weeks, 14 officers were fired, and the old guard of Norfolk was gutted. The cost of corruption. 6 months into his sentence, Sterling sat in the visitation room, looking gaunt. He had lost his fiancée, his home, and his reputation. He was expecting a lawyer. Instead, FBI agent Ross sat down. "I'm here to give you an update, Brett," Ross said coldly. "The civil suit is settled, and since the investigation proved your assets were commingled with proceeds from your off-the-books activities, we seized your accounts. The nest egg you hid, it's gone." Sterling went pale. "You can't do that. It's done. Your pension is revoked due to the felony conviction. When you get out in 6 years, you'll have $0 and a permanent record." Ross stood up to leave. "Oh, and Commander Kincaid donated her settlement to a legal defense fund for victims of police misconduct. In your name. Enjoy your stay." Sterling was left staring at the empty chair, realizing his arrogance had cost him not just his freedom, but his entire future. 5 years later, the sun shone brightly over the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. The class of 2030 sat in pristine white uniforms. "Ladies and gentlemen," the superintendent announced, "please welcome the Director of Naval Special Warfare Operations, Rear Admiral Jordan Kincaid." Jordan took the stage. Her hair was graying, but her presence was more commanding than ever. She looked out at the young cadets. "Authority is not a weapon," she told them, her voice echoing. "It is a burden. 5 years ago, a man with a badge forgot that. He thought power made him invincible. Today, he sits in a cell, forgotten. Remember this. Your rank protects you from nothing if your character is flawed. The truth is like a submarine. It always breaches the surface." The final twist. As Jordan walked to her car after the ceremony, a newly commissioned ensign approached her. He looked nervous, holding his cap in his hands. "Admiral Kincaid?" "Yes, Ensign." "I wanted to say thank you, ma'am. My name is Marcus Sterling." Jordan froze. She studied the boy's face. He had the same jawline as Brett. "Brett is my older brother," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "When the truth came out, I was devastated. I wanted to be a cop like him. But after I saw what he did, and how you stood up with honor, I decided I didn't want to be like him. I wanted to be like you." He straightened his back. "I joined the Navy to restore honor to my family name." Jordan looked at the young man. The cycle of corruption had been broken, replaced by something stronger. She reached out and straightened his collar. "You don't carry his sins, Ensign Sterling," she said softly. "You only carry your own actions. Make them count." "I will, ma'am." Jordan smiled, watching him rejoin his class. She got into her waiting SUV. The system had been broken, but she had fixed it, one painful bolt at a time. "Home, Admiral?" the driver asked. "Home," Jordan said. "I'm driving." And that is the story of how one corrupt officer picked the wrong driver and brought down an entire department. It's a powerful reminder that while authority can be given, respect must be earned. Officer Sterling thought he was the law, but he forgot that the law applies to everyone, especially those who enforce it. Commander Kincaid proved that true strength isn't about being loud. It's about remaining calm when the storm hits. If this story fired you up, smash that like button. It helps the channel grow and lets us know you want more stories like this. What would you have done in Jordan's shoes? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a saga of justice served. Thanks for watching.